Hey everybody, and welcome to our 45th episode of Comic Watchers. Comic Watchers is brought to you by Comic Watch. Comic Watch is your source for fandom news and pro reviews. I'm your host, Cody, and we've got quite a show for you today. This was a hell of a week for comics. We had a hard time narrowing it down, but we ended up deciding on Marvel Comics number 1000 and Justice League number 30. But before we get into that, let's check in with the rest of our gang today.
Hey, Brian from Portland.
This is Matt from Edmond, Oklahoma.
And Nicholas from Carthage, Texas.
So while this was a hell of a week for comic issues, it was also an interesting week for comic news, and we'd like to kick it over to Brian for our comic news of the week.
Hey, yeah. So as we know, Spider-Man is no longer really Marvel with the MCU, going to Sony. There's been a lot of Spider-Man news. I guess Spider-Man had a cameo in Venom, but Marvel took it out. 3 comic covers are getting the poster treatment, or the limited edition poster treatment. It's the Amazing Fantasy cover that has Spider-Man's first appearance, also X-Men number 1, and Hulk 181, where Hulk versus the Wolverine. White Trees from Image number 1 is going to second printing. That was a cool book. I can totally see why that went to second printing. Once and Future from Boom Studios got promoted to being an ongoing series. And we have Kit Harington going to be in the new External movie. He joins his brother from Game of Thrones, Richard Madden. I'm not too familiar with Externals. Are you guys familiar at all?
Well, if you're referring to the super long-lived mutants, yes. But if you're also referring to Eternals, the Jack Kirby property, my friend, actually, it ran for 19 issues plus an annual in the late 70s when the King returned to Marvel. It digs into a lot of similar themes that he did in Fourth World, secret societies, long, centuries-spanning wars between good and evil. This, that, and the other, very Kirby-esque. It did not have the punch or the longevity that Fourth World had. But, Eternals. Hell yeah.
Eternals, in my mind, are a bastardized version of the New Gods, right? Like that is Kirby's vision of the New Gods for Marvel. And it never clicked with me. Even when my beloved Neil Gaiman did it, I still could not get into that book. And I tried, and I wanted to so bad.
Marvel it's never really clicked with. I mean, there's just been, seems like once a decade or so, Marvel tries to smoothly integrate these characters into their wider universe, and it never sticks. Even, like you said, when Neil Gaiman did it. So,
to be fair,
big corporate synergy coming, Eternals, next year. Get ready for lots of Eternals comics from Marvel. Yay.
Word.
It's true. I don't know. I'm not really looking forward to it, but I wasn't looking forward to Black Panther, and it ended up being one of my all-time favorite movies, ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
huh?
Well, yeah, the movie's fantastic. I just wasn't excited at first, but now I'm like, oh, I can't wait. Anything Black Panther. Anyways, Marvel Comics 1000 is going back to second printing. Does anybody know why it's called Marvel Comics 1000?
Ooh, yeah, I can guess. But I'll let the more cynical among us take a first stab at it.
I would like to save that for when we do our discussion of Marvel Comics 1000, but yes, I know exactly why it's called Marvel Comics 1000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so our very own Cody White was recently featured in the news with Bleeding Cool. I always knew Cody would end up on the news. I just never thought it would be for something comic book related. Cody, Cody, tell us a little bit about what happened and all that good jazz.
So of course we're seeing the fallout of Terrific Productions or Terrific LLC, who now owns the rights to Youngblood thanks to some terrible business deals that Rob Liefeld did in the 90s. Andrew Rev, the head of Terrific, was the head of Comico. He bought Comico and then subsequently crashed Comico, and then was a backer for the early days of Image. So in these early days of Image, he inserted himself into ways that would benefit him in the long term, but also screw some creators in the long term. And then he kind of disappeared for a long time until he came back and was like, I own Youngblood. And Rob Liefeld, of course, is like, you sure do, and I want nothing to do with it. So now Terrific is trying to publish a Youngblood series, and Rob Liefeld wants nothing to do with it. And Eric Larson somehow along the way got dragged into it. And Larson is just like, nobody wants Youngblood without Rob Liefeld. Nobody likes Youngblood in and of itself as a concept. So Terrific is running around saying it's going to be great. It's going to sell 200,000 copies. And everybody else is saying, nah, that's ridiculous. And I ended up jumping into the conversation just to say, you know, look, this is not how the industry works. This is how the industry works in 2019. You're ridiculous. And somewhere along the way, like, Bleeding Cool glommed onto that, and Eric Larson was, you know, playing back and forth with it. But yeah, so I mean, that's the short story long. But Andrew Rev has lost his mind. He's not going to make the money he thinks he's going to make. He doesn't have the money to make the money he thinks he's going to make. And that's the bottom line. But I mean, good on him for trying, I guess, you know. He's clearly dyslexic or something. So I mean, you know, try hard and overcome, I guess. It just doesn't seem to be working right now.
Well, yeah, he's become a joke on Twitter. I mean, everyone's just mercilessly ripping this guy. And Eric Larson got involved because Rev tried to buy Savage Dragon from him, which is ludicrous. And yeah, so I mean, he inadvertently picked a fight with, you know, one of the biggest loudmouths on Twitter. And yeah, I mean, you know, Kurt Busiek jumped in for a little bit, and I'm sure some other creators did. Yeah, this guy's just nuts.
Yeah, Gail Simone was in there.
Gail Simone, who's like the reigning queen of Twitter any day of the week. Yeah, God, this guy's insane. I really want Rob Liefeld to somehow get his creation back, because, you know, I don't even want Rob Liefeld to get swindled out of his creation, and that's what happened here. You know, he, in his words anyway, you know, maybe there's probably more to it than that.
He didn't really get swindled out of it. Like, he, as a young man, and I mean, the thing we have to remember is Liefeld and the Todd Father and Eric and all of these guys were really young when they set up Image.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the only guy that had any kind of really seniority amongst the group was Valentino. And Valentino was kind of, you know, outside looking in. Like he was very involved, but he wasn't like, Image is going to make it because Valentino's involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he was the only one with any kind of industry savvy at the time. The rest of them were kids. Like they were younger than any of us.
Oh, absolutely. Right now.
So, you know, they made some mistakes in the beginning. Brian's like, I'm 21. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, to put that in perspective, Liefeld was only 23 in 1992.
Right.
Right. Think about the decisions you made at age 23. They
Horrible.
weren't good.
They were so bad. So yeah, I mean, like, it's not that it was swindling; it was taking advantage of young kids, and that's, I mean,
It's a
that's the
form
world
of
we live
swindle.
in. That's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Potato, potato.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I had for news.
So, so why don't we start out with? So, if we take this episode as the good, the bad, and the ugly, why don't we start out with Marvel 1000, the bad? Um, Marvel 1000 is the 80-year anniversary issue. 80 different creative teams. I'm not going to list them all because we don't got time for that. Doing one-page stories, 90 full pages of story to celebrate the 80th anniversary of Marvel Comics, which is a misnomer in and of itself, but we'll get into that later. Essentially, you have a central storyline constructed by Al Ewing that is the chart of the history of the Eternity Mask. The Eternity Mask moves throughout time from as far back as Camelot. They talk about it, I don't know, somewhere in between. Revolutionary War, I want to say, comes over to America, and this Eternity Mask is meant to, anybody that wears it will be the equal of whoever they're fighting. So, I mean, there's an obvious metaphor there. I might get into that later if nobody else does, but the Eternity Mask, you wear it, you're the equal of whoever you're fighting. If you're fighting somebody lesser than you, it doesn't degrade your power. But if you're fighting somebody bigger than you, all of a sudden I have the power of the Hulk. All right, great, cool. So we're following that while we're touching on major milestones in the history of the Marvel Universe. And everybody who is not exclusive to DC, so no Bendis, no various other handful of people that are exclusive to DC, was involved. I mean, like everybody. Heinberg comes back and does the Young Avengers. You've got DeFalco and friends teaming up to do a Spider-Man page. You've got, I mean, just everybody. And it's cool and it's not cool in so many different levels. I did not catch what our order was today, Nick. So I'm going to go clockwise on my screen. So I'm going to kick it over to Matt.
Okay, well, let's talk about this dumpster fire. No, I'm just kidding. Sort of. We'll get to that. This is a weird comic. In theory, I have nothing against a one-page story. I mean, it's a format. It lends itself to brevity. Okay. What it doesn't lend itself to is 80 pages of cogent storytelling. And that's probably beside the point. But it makes this comic a slog to get through. It took me about 2 days to get through it, reading sporadically, and it felt like it was taking me a week. Because, every page is different, completely different. Writers, art, characters, tone, this, that, the other, and it's just a mishmash. I get what the comic wants to be. It wants to be a big jam, the ultimate jam comic. And I mean, on a certain level, it succeeds at least being a jam comic. But in terms of sitting down and being any sort of a good cogent read, it fails. And it fails because there's just too many cooks in the kitchen for it to work. I think it was a fun idea, but man, this thing just is absolutely not the sum of its parts by any stretch of the imagination. Are there some pages that stand out? Yeah, I'll go back to Eric Larson. I loved his page with the Thing and Spider-Man. I legitimately laughed out loud at that. The Alan Heinberg and Jim Chung back on Young Avengers. That was a nice, cool little treat. Uh, Hell, I'll even give it up for DeFalco and Friends. You know what? They're a classic. They're a classic team, and good on you for coming back together for this deal. But in the end, I feel bad for Al Ewing because he kind of had to patch up together a narrative that was really just a loose spine of a story involving this Eternity Mask, and I just didn't care about it. And then we get to the back of the comic, and instead of having any sort of resolution whatsoever, guess what? It's just a setup for another story for you to go out and spend your money on. Wow. That, and it, unfortunately, if I'm being 100% honest and just a little bit cynical about it, that statement right there perfectly summarizes where Marvel is in 2019 as a corporate piece of the Disney puzzle. And it kills me to say that. It really does. I fucking love Marvel. I grew up on Marvel. But man, Nick, I'm through beating myself up over this deal. What'd you think?
Unfortunately, I wasn't quite as excited about it either, but you mentioned that summarizes about where Marvel stands in the industry today, and I think this book honestly just represents their entire business plan right now. It's interesting to see the complaints about it because they also apply to Marvel's approach to what you see on the shelves at comic stores. So it's an interesting thing. So I looked into it. It's a 90-page book, and there's about 6 pages or so that are not actual stories. So out of the 84 stories, I liked about a dozen of them. And that's roughly 15% when you do the numbers. I went in just to see what their percentage is of things that I'm interested in what they're putting out. And I went and looked at what they released for this week, Marvel's newest books. They've got 25 new books on the shelf, and I'm planning to buy about 5 of them. And that might be on the lighter end. Some people are probably more interested in the Absolute Carnage spin-offs and stuff like that, or they're following certain series. But I have about 5 that I know I'm going to purchase. That's about 20%. So I think you could take this as a great representation to Marvel's approach and how they treat readers right now. If they find out that you like something, they're going to bombard you with it until you can't really afford it anymore. And this one, honestly, it feels like it's nostalgia. So that's what they're bringing all this stuff back. They're bringing all these different characters. And I liked, like I said, about 12 of them. Blade had a cool run. Doctor Strange had a pretty memorable panel in there with the washing machine and all that. That's already going around on Twitter. That Miss America had a cool story. And I think Elsa Bloodstone I had to mention because I believe she's going to come up with Jeff, the shark-looking creature, in the new Deadpool series that was announced. And so we're going to see some things tie in, and there's a little bit of like fan service going on here, but that's just ultimately not enough. And this is what Marvel's relied on over and over again. So when you go to your comic store and you see 25 new books on the shelf and you pick up 5 or 6 of them, you're leaving behind all the stuff that Marvel is just, I guess, throwing at the readers and expecting them to be able to take all of this in week after week. So it's cool to see it condensed in a book as a full representation of what Marvel's doing in Marvel 1000. But it's also kind of sad because this is Marvel and we all want them to do great. So while this approach is really not something that I would prefer, I just couldn't get that thought out of my mind when I was reading this book that this is what Marvel is doing. This is their approach, and it's just condensed into one book. And that was the ultimate takeaway from this book. And it was great that it ended on a cliffhanger to get you interested in what's coming in 2020, that the mask will be revealed if you just come back and, buy X amount of books. And it honestly wouldn't surprise me if this was centered around an event that would have tie-ins and all of that stuff. So it's you know, the cycle continues, and it's hard to get interested in books like this, even when there are things like the Alex Ross Hulk page. Like, that one's gonna go around and be popular. It's great, but it gets lost, and ultimately that's what a lot of what Marvel's doing right now is just getting lost in the clutter of stuff that they're putting out. That's kind of my whole thoughts on the book.
If I can build on something you said real quick, it reads like it's a product, not a work of art or a creation of love or anything like that. So,
Y'all are haters. Just kidding.
Enlighten us, Brian.
I'll be the ray of sunshine. All right. So I thought it was a cute book. I mean, I didn't go into it thinking I was going to get something memorable off of it. Did we talk about why it was 1,000?
Not yet, but I will.
Oh, okay. That was one of my questions. Okay. I really like the Doctor Strange spin cycle. I love the art, how I call it modern art, where it, had that feel of 1950, but with a modern look or modern color. I like that part. I like the last word with Alex Ross. Anything Alex Ross does as far as art is naturally beautiful. Like his Hulk paintings through the panels were absolutely stunning. I mean, he must have used like 50 shades of green just like within like a certain amount. It's just beautiful. I mean, that book is worth it just to see that alone. I also liked the Spider-Man where he saved a pregnant lady and they wanted to name him after Peter, but Peter was like, or wanted to know his real name, and he said, hey, call him Ben. It was a very touching story. And yeah, that's pretty much. I thought it was a cute book. I mean, I didn't think too much into it. I think it's exactly what I expected, so I had low expectations. So I liked it. Yeah, that's all I got.
Well, I have a ton to say about this book. I mean, just a flat out ton. Let's start with, yes, Brad Meltzer's Spider-Man story. We'll name him Ben. I mean, that was the pinnacle of the book. There was a lot of throwaway pages, but that particular page was just magnificent. Way to go, Brad. Much love. Thank you. The reason this was numbered number 1,000, and the only reason that this was numbered 1,000 was because Action Comics and Detective Comics hit number 1,000 this year. So, like, my number one out of the gates from the solicit's complaint is that you didn't earn this. You didn't have a continuous series run for 1,000 issues. Y'all just made this shit up. This is like the infinite number one code to the ultimate power, right? To, I guess, to the 100th power or 1,000th power. I don't know. I'm not a math guy. But anyway, number 1,000 because everybody else is doing it. And that's garbage. I mean, that's just garbage. Come on, Marvel. You're better than that. Like, I don't hate Marvel. I really don't. But you're better than that. But they did it because everybody else is doing it. So, whatever. My other huge complaint is going to come from some quotations I've got from Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And if you're a comics fan and you have not read Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, do yourself a favor and go pick this book up. I mean, you can get it for free in PDF from damn near any university worth a damn. So, I mean, just go find it, Google it, Understanding Comics, The Invisible Art, Scott McCloud. Read it, because it will enlighten you to things that you didn't know you didn't know. So I'm going to start from, I believe this is chapter 3. And he says, and since viewer identification is a speciality of cartooning, cartoons have historically held an advantage in breaking into world popular culture. On the other hand, no one expects audiences to identify with brick walls and landscapes, and indeed backgrounds tend to be slightly more realistic. In some comics, this split is far more pronounced. The Belgian clear line style of Hergé's Tintin combines the very iconic characters with unusually realistic backgrounds. Now, here's the important bit right here. The combination allows readers to mask themselves in a world, allows readers to mask themselves in a character and safely enter a sensually stimulating world. This is the Eternity Mask, right? The entire metaphor of the Eternity Mask, as set out by Al Ewing throughout this book, is this notion that anybody can put on the mask and be a hero. Anybody can be Superman. Anybody can be Batman. Anybody can be Spider-Man. And yes, while that is true, the heavy-handed metaphor throughout this seemed so absurdly insulting to me that whatever redeeming qualities there were in this book were lost in this metaphor. Yeah, any of us can be brave like Clark, but I can't fly. I can't freeze things with my breath. I can't blow up a building with a fart. Like, this is taking the metaphor too far. And I get what they're trying to do, but it's so heavy-handed. And Al Ewing, you are better than this. Like, I know that you are a better writer than this. So, I mean, that was my biggest problem. And then the fact that they tried to take this and spin it in a way that, yes, for the Marvel Universe, most of this stuff is true. Yes, for the Marvel Universe, Black Panther was the first black superhero. But he wasn't the first black superhero. Come on, Marvel. No editor looked at that and was like, maybe we should temper that because there was stuff that came before that set this up. Like, all of my problems with this book stem from almost an ideological standpoint of Marvel trying to say, hey, even though we didn't have superheroes before Superman, we had the first superhero. Come on. You know better, and you goddamn well know that you deliberately set this up with a number 1000 issue to try to take power from DC for creating the comic superhero. They may not have created the superhero, but they created the comic superhero, and you can't take that from them. They earned that, and they ran Action Comics monthly or weekly for 1,000 issues. They ran Tech monthly or weekly for 1,000 issues. How many issues did you run Marvel Comics for? 45? 50? Come on. So, sorry to rant, but I mean, I've been holding that back for 48 hours now, and now it's all out, and I feel a lot better. Like, I feel like the weight of the world is off my shoulders. Do we have any final thoughts or rebuttals on Marvel 1000?
I don't know what's happening here.
No, I mean, I think it's interesting, like, every point that you go into, from the editorial decisions to the marketing decisions, I liked how you said almost every complaint comes from an ideological standpoint, because I almost agree entirely. Reading through this book, I just can't help but think of this is how Marvel is approaching the industry, and this is what they're treating readers like. And it's kind of a shame. And these people are better than this, and this publisher is better than this. So I think it was a well-earned rant.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in light of the good things we're about to say about the Distinguished Competitions book in the next segment. This comic fucking sucked. And I'm just going to come right out and say it. Like, you guys were had some excellent points, but at the end of the day, it just fucking sucked.
It was cute. It was cute.
It has some good pages, but like Nick said, it's, if 15% is not a good score to get on a test. And yeah, from an ideological standpoint, I'm glad you put it in those terms, because that sort of codifies what I was feeling. And, I don't want to sit here and be like, fuck this comic about any comic that we review on this show.
Right.
But from an ideological standpoint, from a deep and abiding lifelong love of comics and the art and the medium and the characters, that this comic earns that review. Oh yeah.
No, I'm totally with you, Matt. To counter one thing that Nick said, I don't think that this is necessarily the entire standpoint of Marvel. I do appreciate that Marvel is reaching out to niche crowds with books like, Irredeemable Squirrel Girl and Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and things like that are reaching out to particular sections of fandom that tend to not get any attention. I do appreciate that about them. Like, they're throwing out a lot of books. Arrow, Agents of Atlas, Sword Master. They're clearly trying to reach their Asian audience on their ground. And there's something commendable about that. So it's not just like throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. So to some degree, I think that that's not fair. But with a book like Marvel 1000, it's not even that. Like, it's throwing spaghetti at MCU fans and saying, eat it. And they will. And they're going to eat it.
It ultimately just feels directionless, though. And in their attempts to appease all these different markets, they've lost the sense of quality storytelling, and it feels like a marketed approach.
Well, it is a marketed approach.
It is exactly a marketed approach.
Where they were in 1995, right before they declared bankruptcy, with the darn marketing department calling all the shots on the books, which completely wrecked them. And they've just utterly forgotten the lessons of 25 years ago.
Yeah, I review most of those titles and I enjoy them, but it's dangerous waters for them to be going in, because it's not good business practices in this industry. It's
short-sighted and foolish.
It's amazing to live in a world where you're like, man, you know who was a great editor-in-chief? Joe Quesada.
Hey, you know what? I mean, that's another conversation, but hey.
It sure is.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, at that moment in time, we were all like, man, he won't let Wolverine smoke. He won't do this. He won't do that. And it's like, now we're like, but he did a lot of really good things. And I kind of miss Joe Quesada. So, Joe Quesadilla, we're thinking of you. Any final thoughts on Marvel 1000? Let's move on to Justice League. League number 30.
The last 10 minutes of ranting, those were our final thoughts.
Fair enough. I mean, it deserved some ranting. It earned some ranting. Like, it did everything it needed to do to get some rants. Justice League number 30. This is coming to you from Scott Snyder and James Tinney in the fourth writing. Jorge Jimenez on art. This is the first chapter of the Justice Doom War. This is what it's all been building up to, folks. Like, we have been following 29 months, or 29 divided by 2. 14 months of Justice League. 2 more months of No Justice, in addition to the couple of months of Dark Knight's Metal, to build to this point. Justice versus Doom. Now we've got Lex Luthor in one corner, who has become an apex human. This is the original formation of humans that was a human, Terran, and Martian hybrid created by the Mother Perpetua, who is the mother of the Anti-Monitor, the Monitor, and the World Forger. So you got Luthor over here with his Legion of Doom. You've got Clark and Bruce and Diana and every other hero they can find that's not corruptible over here. And here we go. Starman is coordinating the whole thing. He's saying, okay, so the totality, which was introduced in the first arc of Justice League, that Luthor has a piece of, is the most powerful weapon in the universe. Forget a Green Lantern ring. We're way above that now. The totality piece, the doorknob that he has from his father, is the greatest weapon in the universe. We got a little bit, but we can find more. So Starman sets basically the core members of the League. You've got Bruce, Diana, and Clark go into the future. You've got Hal and John Stewart go into the past. We can find more pieces of this and give ourselves a fighting chance. If you go to the past, if you go to the future, find the shards, bring them back. And so they go. And so they go, and Clark and Diana and Bruce run into Kamandi the First Boy in the future, 2 weeks too late. And Barry and John run into the Justice Society of America, 2 weeks too late. And this is where we stand. They're too late to stop the war. They're too late to win the war. There is no hope. The rest of the Justice League and all of their allies are holding down the fort, trying to keep these portals open against insurmountable forces. And you have the most despair-ridden war you can imagine. There is no outcome for this other than an immediately amazing triumph. That's where we stand by the end of number 30. Matt.
3 letters. JSA. 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 They are back. It is the original group. I couldn't be happier. The JSA is my favorite team in all of comics. I've got much love for the X-Men, don't get me wrong, but the Justice Society are it, and they've been missing. And don't give me that crap appearance of the Flash in the Button crossover. That's nonsense. I don't want to hear about that. That was just a cheap trick. This is real. They are back. Except that it's amazing, and I could almost not care less about the rest of this comic, except it was also amazing. So, great, good on you, Snyder and Tynion. I have to say that this is actually the second issue in a row that was a really good jumping on point for this comic. I mean, there's a ton of exposition, but it was kind of needed because this is a really dense, convoluted story that Snyder's been weaving for the last a while now. And all the players are in place. We've got the Apex Predator and Perpetua, Justice versus Doom, big meaty concepts going at it, but at the heart of it, and we've got the Hope of Hope with the Justice Society, the original DC team, original team in comics, returning. And I am all in. I could not be more excited about this comic. So, yeah. And I think 31 ships this coming week. So, awesome. Nick, how about you? What'd you think about this?
Yeah, big fan of Snyder. I've probably said it time and time again in the past. His Batman run just hooked me in, and he seems to understand DC mythology or DC lore. So seeing him work with just Batman was great. So whenever they announced that he was going to they were handing him the toys of the Justice League and all that came with it, I knew it was right in his wheelhouse. He gets to do complex stories. He gets to build these arcs, and I don't think he's disappointed at all. I haven't followed this series quite as closely. I've read it a bit more sporadically because I'll fall behind and then catch up. So this issue was great to feel welcome still, and I think Scott Snyder does that really well in his stories. He finds these interesting points to get new readers on, or to feel like it's a breath of fresh air in the arc, and you're ready to push on with this layered storytelling that he likes to do. So we've been following this along for, like Cody said, I think, what, 14 months now. So it's been going on for some time, and of course the JSA is the ultimate reveal that everybody's going to be talking about. But to be fair, I approach Marvel 1000 from an ideological standpoint, and it's interesting when you do the same thing to Justice League 30. It feels like a book that nobody should care about. I mean, from the outside comics world, you're going to have news outlets looking at Marvel Comics 1000 because of the name. But these huge events in DC's Justice League 30 are a great representation when compared to Marvel 1000 of what they're doing with their stories. I think they're approaching it in a better way, and they're getting readers what they want in a way that they actually want it. And this story is a great representation of that. So you get fan service moments like Commandi and the JSA that get everybody excited, but it's also a great book. So you can pick up Justice League 30 and read it and enjoy it and want to read more. So I think it's really cool to see. The show tends to do that when we talk about books like this one after another. DC is their approach. You're not going to see 25 books from them this week, and I think it works in their favor because Justice League 30 shows that this is solid storytelling, and the artwork, the writing, everything seems to be firing on all cylinders, and it also feels solid from a step back. When you're a fan and you're standing in the comic store, this is what you want to pick up because this is what you're excited to read. And I think DC's tapped into that, and maybe Marvel has lost sight of it. So that's a pretty interesting point that I came across when looking at these books. But yeah, I'm with Matt. JSA all the way. If you followed, I think maybe 10 shows back, maybe less, I picked up the entire Jeff Johns JSA run, and over that next week, I just did a deep dive into it, and it was amazing. I see why everybody loved it. Dr. Fate doesn't get near enough love, but I think it's coming. I think this series, I think what Scott Snyder's doing with this team, they're about to really explode in DC Comics, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of them, I hope. So just really excited, and I needed this from DC right now. It's just great stuff. B?
So I didn't get to read it. I actually wanted. I read the first couple of pages, and then I was like, you know what? I want to actually read it from number 1. So I'm gonna actually try within the next week or so, just binge the whole series because I felt a little bit lost. I wasn't sure what was going on because I haven't been reading it, and I do like Snyder's writing, so I just want to go back and just binge the whole series and catch up. So, Cody.
Yeah, so let me preface this with saying, one, I loved this issue. I started with Snyder way back in, 2011. Fell in love with his Swamp Thing. Fell in love with his Batman. Started reading The Wake. Started reading his Witches. Witches was brilliant. So, I mean, I started to really like Snyder about 8 years ago. And then his Justice League started, and I had high hopes. And his Justice League started, and I was not into it. And it took me some time to really start to get into his Justice League. As of this issue, everything else that I ever had a complaint about his Justice League is null and void. He has taken it to the next level. He has integrated all of these disparate concepts into a unified whole in a beautiful way that anybody, if you like any of these characters, pick up Justice League 30 and you're good. You know everything you need to know. Yeah, there might be some nuance along the way that maybe would make it a little bit better, but this is it. This is all you need to know. He recapped everything beautifully. I mean, some of that was James Tynion. James Tynion is the king of recaps. Nobody does it better than James Tynion. But yeah, like this was an immaculate book, and if we're not running too long, Let me go on to a rant. The year is 1987, and a young Cody White is in St. Petersburg, Florida, and going into his first comic book shop. Not buying off the drugstore or the newsstand, but an actual legit no shit comic book shop. So there I am. I'm in there and I have 68 cents in my pocket. I'm 7 years old. That's a lot of money for me. And they have a quarter bin and I'm digging through it and I'm looking for a couple of books. And what do I key on? But All-Star Squadron Annual Number 2, which is the post-crisis origin of the JSA. And a random Superman family in which Arvell Jones does a reintroduction of the Doom Patrol before Grant Morrison jumps on Doom Patrol. Those two books, no kidding, shaped my life. I love the JSA. I'm so happy to have them back and under the care of somebody that knows enough to treat them right. Jeff Johns' series was brilliant. Roy Thomas, much love for all of the care that you gave to them over the years. But Snyder has this innate ability to take it to the next level, and I'm excited about that. Like, I hope that when they launch a JSA title, they give it to Snyder. That's my personal feeling as a longtime 30-plus year fan of the JSA now. That's what I hope for. And that was what got me going on this series. I mean, I read it on Friday and have been thinking about it ever since. No, stop it. Matt Meyer is the kryptonite to my Superman right now. So yeah, I loved this book. I loved everything about it. I thought it was brilliant. I thought Jorge Jimenez's art has really been developing in a really great way. At first, I thought he was too cartoonish, and at moments he still is for me, for my personal opinion. But it has really developed into something that, I mean, that one-page splash page of all of the Justice League members that were gathered being deputized, I thought that was borderline Perezian. Like, that's the greatest compliment I can give to somebody drawing an ensemble. It was a borderline Perezian piece. So, I mean, many compliments out to Jimenez for that. Tinney and Snyder, hats off to you guys. That was a hell of an issue. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the JSA, Kamandi, and in Superman number 14 from Brian Michael Bendis, we see the Legion of Superheroes come back, that all three of those things come back in the same week as Marvel 1000. DC is showing them what's up. DC is flexing nuts. And you know what? They got it. They got it. They win. It is what it is.
No doubt. Yeah, so I'll just say that I don't think you're going to find many fans out there that will argue against Grant Morrison's run of JLA in the 90s being the greatest Justice League run ever. And when the first issue of Snyder's run came out, like, I was immediately consumed with this feeling that, man, this might actually wind up being, if not as good, a very, very close second. And as of this issue, and really since the last arc, that feeling has been fulfilled. Mm-hmm. If you're not reading Justice League, I don't know what to tell you. Why are you reading comics? Because it's amazing. It's probably it's easily one of the top books DC's putting out right now. Very, very, very easily, if not the best. Hell. So, man, that's my final thoughts on it. DC trumps Marvel. Boom.
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 Any other final thoughts on Justice League 30? why don't we roll into what have you been reading and what are you looking forward to, starting with Matt Meyer.
Oh man, can we talk about Spider-Man Life Story number 6 real quick? Because oh my God, that came out this week too. I reread this series leading up to it because Chip Zdarsky has been doing such a wonderful and heartfelt job with this story. And even when it got really dark in issues 2 and 3, there's been a love for Spider-Man there, and that completely plays out in a perhaps inevitable conclusion that nonetheless is just heartrending in the best way possible in issue number 6. If you didn't read this, it is probably the best love letter to Spider-Man I could possibly imagine. And man, the Chip Zdarsky, please keep doing what you're doing. The dude's just unstoppable right now. So that's what I've been reading. What I'm looking forward to, man, next week is it. Millennium, Legion of Superheroes. They are back. They are very different looking. That's awesome, though. I love it. I'm a relatively recent convert to the Legion, but man, I could not. There's just been a piece of the DC, the heart of DC, missing without the Legion in publication for the last few years, and I mean, same thing with the Justice Society. So I mean, right now, if you're a DC fan, this is it. This is the time to come back to the fold. Nick, how about you?
Well, we've definitely spent enough time on the big two. If you've been following along, I've still been going into the Valiant deep dive. This past week, I went into the death-defying Dr. Mirage. That is a tongue twister for real. And this series, it actually was surprisingly great because the paranormal investigator isn't something that I typically want to get into. Hellblazer was my first entry, I guess, and I liked it, but it didn't really absorb me like it should have. This one was great, though. It's told around the dynamics of a love story set in Eternal. So you have Shan Fong, the main character, who can see dead people, basically, can go into the dead side, who can see all these ghosts around her. And then her husband has passed away, but she can't see his ghost. So the first series of the death-defying Dr. Mirage, I can say it, actually delves into this story of her just trying to see her husband. And it's crazy emotional, and it hits all the right horror notes, mystery notes that I want. And the ending sets up an awesome series that acted as a sequel just called Second Lives that explores their time where they can actually see each other. And it gets twisted, and there are twists and turns and all that, but it's just great. And I think it's a testament to what Valiant's doing. Again, this is a series that you don't have to know anything else about what Valiant's doing. You can pick up Dr. Mirage and just enjoy it as it is. And a lot of their series are like that. And I did that deep dive into this character because what I'm excited for came out this week in just Dr. Mirage from Magdalene Visaggio and Nick Robles, I believe. Colors by Jordi Belair, and Dave Sharp did letters. Loved his stuff on Harley Quinn, so it was great to see him in this. But I thought she takes the character in a totally new direction. And I won't spoil too much, but it is amazing. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of people talk about this series. The reviews are already coming out, and they're super high. I think it's going to be another hit from Valiant, but this one has something different. This one's going to have a bit more mass appeal that people are going to want to dive into it. And it's great to see the prior stuff that Valiant has done with this character is also really great. So that is pretty much everything that I'm doing in my own reading right now. I know Spawn 300 comes out. We've got stuff like that, and the show keeps me around to the big two, but Valiant is what has me reading every night. B?
Yeah, I don't think I got to read comics this week, but I did finish The Boys from Amazon Prime. Oh, that's not true. I did read, and that was actually a really good series. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Looking forward to season 2. It's twisted. It's everything that I am. Um, I did read. I actually did some throwbacks. So I love all of the comicology, especially for Valiant. That is like the place to go. Um, Marvel Unlimited, DC Universe. Although I don't really read too much on DC Universe, but the other two I do. So I went back, and I'm actually going to start from X Factor, the original with the original X-Men. So far, I've gotten through 2 issues. It's been amazing. Just going back, it has that old feel. I never actually read that whole series at all, so I'm going in with fresh, brand new eyes. Let's see. I think I read something else, but I can't remember, so maybe it's not worth talking about. Cody?
Yeah, so I mean, I envy you getting to read X Factor, the original lineup from #1, and then eventually you're going to hit the Peter David lineup, which is one of my favorite comics of all time. So that's awesome. Good for you. And I agree, The Boys was just friggin' brilliant. What have I been reading this week? I have been reading. Boy, what have I been reading this week? That's a great question, because I had something lined up and then I totally forgot what it was. I wanted to talk about Nick. You were talking about Dr. Mirage, and one thing that I do really like about Valiant right now is that I was a 90s Valiant reader. I haven't read any of the new stuff other than Killers, which we read for the podcast. But I love that I understand what you're talking about with my 90s background in the 2012 and prior or post Valiant universe. Like that's impressive that they managed to capture the spirit of these characters and carry it through. Like I think that's really rad.
Yeah, I think I have heard from multiple creators that they started the new reboot, I believe, in 2012. That was everything from that point on was a shared universe, but they're not ignoring Valiant Classic. So all these fans that have grown up with all this, they can still feel like what they read and what they love counts. And it's really cool on my side because I'm a newer fan. So going back to these stories, I can see the relation of it, and I can see how they're building on the legacy of this character. And now that they have this shared continuity, to me, it's everything I'm looking for in comics.
Yeah, I mean to me that's amazing. Like you talk about Dr. Mirage, and I know who you're talking about because I read Dr. Mirage in 94, 95 when I was, 13 or 14 years old. So I mean like I get what you're saying even though I haven't read the character in literally decades at this point. So I mean that's pretty rad. Like that's an impressive thing. And speaking of Mags, Visaggio, and Dr. Mirage, keep your eyes peeled at www.comic-watch.com for an exclusive interview with Mags about Dr. Mirage coming from our own Nick Osborne.
Hi, and if you haven't already, you got to check out the Bloodshot interview. I got to chat with Tim Seeley. It was awesome. Bloodshot is happening. It is definitely Valiant's moment right now. People are going to be talking about these characters, and just really cool. You got to check it out, and like Cody said, more to come.
And also the Brett Booth interview that we did about Bloodshot. So, yes, Valiant is living its heyday. As for what I'm looking forward to, Doomsday Clock number 11. How has it made it all the way to me and nobody has said Doomsday Clock number 11 is coming out September 4th? And I know
your thunder, buddy.
I know there are doubters. I know there are people that are like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, Matt. But it's coming. And it is happening. And I could not be more excited. We may only get 4 issues of Doomsday Clock this year. And you know what? We're lucky to get 4 issues of Doomsday Clock this year. The bottom line is this is a magnum opus. This is a be-all, end-all, career-defining moment for Jeff Johns, who has already had like 6 career-defining moments. So this is it. Like, this is the only book that matters to me right now Doomsday Clock. I can't wait. And you can look for that for that review on 9/4 because I will have it out on release day at www.comic-watch.com. Any final thoughts, fellas?
Oh, I forgot to say what I was looking forward to. Web of Black Widow.
Ah, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, Brian, you want to take us to Black?
Oh, yeah. Check us out on all of our media websites and everything else at comic-watch.com, or you can check us out on Facebook, the Comic Watch. Actually, just Google Comic Watch. We'll be everywhere. That's it. Bye.
Taking over. Bye.